I'm marrying the president's daughter's lover. You're no longer needed. On the phone, Charles spoke with a triumphant tone. I could almost see his malicious grin. I've finally started to catch a break. Staying with you, I'd be stuck as a regular employee forever, but now I'm gonna strive to be the next president. He said, laughing. It was as if he was implying that not being able to climb the career ladder was my fault. Charles had this weakness in his character. He tended to blame others when things went wrong. I used to be able to forgive that. Back when I still loved him, but not anymore. My patience has run out. I can't forgive Charles anymore. I have to take action. To make Charles realize his mistakes. My name is Sarah. I just turned 40 a few days ago. I married Charles when I was 25, and we both worked together. I quit my job when our first son was born, but after giving birth to our second son, I started working part-time at a nearby supermarket. Living on Charles's income alone was a bit tight. Our sons are both enthusiastic about their studies and sports, and I'm excited about their future. But Charles was indifferent even to them. To be precise, he had little interest in his family. Naturally, he barely spoke to me either, just the necessary greetings every day, and we hadn't had a real conversation in years. There's a parent-teacher conference at our younger son, Tim's school. I had pressed Charles about it. Let's go see it together on that day. I got it. We were both supposed to take a day off to attend the conference. But on the night before, Charles suddenly said this. Going to a parent-teacher conference, it's already more than enough if one parent shows up. I think I'll pass. What are you suddenly talking about? Tim is looking forward to having both of us come. Why would he say something like this out of the blue? Despite my reproachful gaze, Charles calmly said. I'm busy. Don't lump me together with the part-time old ladies. Who are you calling an old lady? Who? I snapped back at him half-jokingly, but I was hurt inside. I'm almost 40, and for the past 15 years since we got married, we've mostly been working together. Because of that, we've grown apart, and a rift has formed between Charles and me. I knew that, which is why I invited Charles to the parent-teacher conference, hoping to communicate through Tim and reconnect with him. But Charles just coldly said, if you don't want to be treated like an old lady, then maybe you should care a bit more about your looks. I'm fine being an old lady. I stuck my tongue out at him. Charles left, and I let out a sigh when I was alone. But I take a look in the mirror. There was a middle-aged woman with a slender waist reflected back at me. In addition to my part-time job, until last year, I had also been taking care of my mother-in-law. Her dementia was getting worse, and she started wandering around at night. I had many sleepless nights because of my mother-in-law. Mom sleeps during the day, so she doesn't require much attention. But at night, she walks around all night long. Being bedridden would be worse, right? Mom wants to get some exercise too. Charles fell back asleep without a care, even though he was talking about his own mother. I was the only one burdened with the hardship. As I aged, it became tougher to balance my part-time job and caregiving, so I had to put my mother-in-law in a nursing home, though it broke my heart. Please, come visit me from time to time, she said with a look of anxiety. I do bring my sons to visit her as much as possible. But Charles has never visited his grandmother. I also attended Tim's parent-teacher conference alone. Charles came home later than usual. I could tell he had been out drinking with his colleagues from the smell. My eldest son, Mark, was acting sneaky. Following his brother's lead, Tim also started behaving more distant towards me. Both of them are entering that difficult age. Despite thinking I shouldn't interfere too much, I couldn't help but worry. I decided to confront the two of them. Come on, tell me the truth. What are you guys hiding? Actually, Mark exchanged glances with Tim before finally giving in and speaking. Your birthday is coming up soon, right? So we decided to pool our allowances together and buy a cake. What? I was wide-eyed. I glanced at the calendar. Come to think of it, my birthday is just 3 days away. To be honest, turning 40 isn't something I'm particularly thrilled about. Yet, I found myself smiling, overjoyed by my son's feelings. On my birthday, true to their promise, the boys brought home a cake. "Mom, we even tried to decorate the room for you," Mark said proudly. The decorations were clumsy, but the entire room was adorned with origami decorations. I was filled with happiness. Until Charles comes back. "What the hell is this?" As soon as he entered the room, Charles flew into a rage. "I'm exhausted, you know. Can't I get some rest at home? What is all this? These ridiculous decorations." But today is Mom's birthday and a birthday at her age? Must be nice. With that, Charles tore off the decorations that were on the nearby wall and threw them in the trash. Clean this up right now. And bring me a beer. Hey! What do you think you're doing to these kids' feelings?" I raised my voice. This was just too much. My heart ached as I watched my sons start to clean up, disheartened. "What? Sure, I'm 40 and a grown woman, right? I'm not exactly at the age to be getting excited about birthdays. But I was happy to see my sons care. What if they were celebrating your birthday? I'd be disgusted just thinking about it." Charles twisted his face disdainfully for all to see. And after complaining about the slowness of the cleanup, he continued. "I don't want you guys taking up my time. Just leave me alone." "That's a terrible thing to say," I muttered, looking down. My sons were on the verge of tears as they cleaned up the decorations. That's when Charles noticed the cake on the table. "I'll consider this a bonus for my hard work today." Mark and Tim were wide-eyed. In front of all of us, stunned, Charles grabbed the cake with his hands and shoved it into his mouth. Tim started crying. Mark was rubbing his back. His eyes were also filled with tears. "What are you doing? You should go on a diet, you know. You shouldn't be eating this kind of stuff," Charles said, smirking. And just like that, Charles had ruined my birthday and the boys' efforts. For all his talk about work, Charles's income was far from high. In fact, there were no signs of promotion in sight, and he was rumored among his colleagues to be incompetent at work. When he was drunk, the complaints would come out. "Kate would really listen to me at times like this," Charles said, holding a can of beer in his hand. I was taken aback. "Who is Kate?" Listening carefully, it seemed that Charles was quite close to a woman named Kate, a junior at his company, who was fond of him. He rambled on about how wonderful Kate was, fueled by the alcohol. "Unlike you, she's pretty, honest, and cute. How far have you gone with her? I wish I could marry Kate. Then I could leave this damn house." Charles twisted his face bitterly. I was at a loss for words. Even though he was drunk, I never thought he would confess his desire to cheat right to my face. The next day, Charles looked guilty. He seemed to vaguely remember praising Kate to the skies while he was drunk. "I'm heading out. Have a good time with Kate," I said. Charles glared at me in silence and went off to work. At this point, I was convinced of Charles's affair. But even so, I found it hard to take the final step to divorce. What would the boys think? I suddenly recalled the ruined birthday party. Since then, the boys had kept their distance from Charles. He was originally indifferent to family, so there was a distance between him and his sons. However, due to this recent incident, his sons completely closed off their hearts. Yet, Charles is still their father. I wondered, is it really okay to cut ties with him that easily? I was troubled. Then, I realized that my worries were in vain. On my way home after my part-time job, I received a call from Charles. He got straight to the point. "I'm marrying a mistress, who is the daughter of a company president. I don't need you anymore." I couldn't comprehend the situation for a moment. My thoughts were frozen. How sudden and absurd is that? But Charles continued to speak as if this was an undeniable fact. "I've finally struck it lucky. If I stayed with you, I would remain a regular employee forever, but now I'm gonna work hard as the next company president. Kate is the boss's daughter? I was surprised again. It was clear that Charles was having an affair with Kate. But I never imagined that Kate was a woman of such high status. To put it bluntly, Charles is average in both income and looks, and he's approaching middle age. I thought he was out of his league with the daughter of a boss. Kate? Well, yeah. You've been obsessed with Kate lately, haven't you? Yeah, I guess so. There was Kate, wasn't there? Charles spoke in a strange way, as if implying he had other mistresses. Anyway, please break up with me, Sarah. Okay. Goodbye, then. I was astounded at how easily I agreed to the breakup. It's not that I was letting Charles have his way. Quite the opposite, I couldn't forgive him. As a first step, I decided to distance myself from him. I knew my sons would understand. When Charles came home with the divorce papers, I signed my name without hesitation. He tried to push the custody of our sons onto me, which I had anticipated, so I wasn't surprised. When I explained the situation to my sons, they responded with figures. Dad never really cared about us, did he? Don't get desperate. I'm here for you, I assured them. That's our line. Mark said, looking out for me. Mom, don't be sad about the divorce. Mark and I are here for you. That's right, Mom. Thank you, both of you. I was moved to tears by my son's words. A month had passed since the divorce from Charles. My life hadn't changed much. I sent my sons to school, took care of household chores, and worked my part-time job. Then, on my way home from work, Charles called me again. He was in a complete panic. Help me! It's Kate! What happened with Kate? I asked leisurely. Mark's making curry for dinner and waiting for me at home today. I can't wait and am really looking forward to it. While thinking about this, I just want to get home as soon as possible. Kate came to my house, and now my wife knows about the affair. That's tough. I responded in a calm manner. I had expected this to happen sooner or later. Concerned about Charles's behavior, Mark and I had followed him and found out the truth. Charles's so-called mistress whom he wanted to marry wasn't Kate. Kate was just a junior at his company and came from an ordinary family. She was young and beautiful, which probably tempted Charles to cheat. However, his actual mistress, the supposed boss's daughter, was in her late 30s and not particularly attractive. How did Kate find out? I did it. I said it as if it was nothing. What? I told Kate the truth. I even sent her pictures as proof. Charles raised his voice at my words. What have you done to me? Thanks to you, my wife is furious and I've been kicked out of the house. I've even lost my job. It's because you deceived that president's daughter, isn't it? That's why this is happening. Charles was speaking as if he was the victim, but he was actually at the center of the problem. I sighed. How many years have you been deceiving Kate and your current wife? Shut up, it's none of your business. Well, it's true now, since we're divorced, I said with a bitter smile. But you were cheating on me while we were married, weren't you? What do you think of me and our sons? Just a nuisance. Marrying you was a mistake. What's wrong with trying to fix a mistake? Charles replied like a spoiled child. He is just a perpetual child, never admitting his faults. But even if he doesn't admit it, others won't let his faults slide. I've lost my job and home, and I don't even know if I'll be able to find another job. My wife talked to her dad, the president, and it seems he's pressured other companies not to hire me. And this is my problem how? I said to Charles, who was speaking so seriously. He was dumbfounded. Besides, I'm not your wife anymore. Let's each take care of our own issues. With that, I hung up the phone. There were several more calls, but I didn't answer. Instead, I got a call from Kate. Charles came to my house. He said he wanted to start over. That's really? I said, utterly astounded. I'm sure Kate on the other end of the phone had a similar expression. Of course, I turned him down and told him never to come back. That's the right decision. I nodded in agreement. After venting her frustration about Charles, Kate's voice softened. I didn't know that Charles was married. I know. All of us were deceived. All of us were victims, and there was no reason for us to hate each other. I'm sorry. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I ended the call with a bitter smile. I also got a call from Charles's current wife. She was emotional, expressing her frustration about separating from Charles and how she was deceived. Her strong voice made me think that Charles really deceived the wrong person. I received a call saying my mother-in-law was feeling unwell, so I went to the facility. The staff looked troubled. We've contacted her son, but he just insists handle it at the facility. So you contacted me? Yes, we know you are divorced, but there's no one else we could talk to. I see. I couldn't bring myself to hate my mother-in-law even though I divorced Charles. She was a solid person before dementia set in, teaching me how to cook. My sons were also close to her. I'm coming in. As I entered the room, I heard a moaning sound. My mother-in-law was trying to sit up in the bed at the back of the room. Don't push yourself. Weren't you divorced from my son? She asked with an anxious voice. I nodded and approached her bed. Yes, but you are still my son's grandmother. And the facility contacted me, saying you weren't feeling well. It's just a cold. And I'm already feeling better. She said, then coughed softly. The cold hadn't gone away. The staff told me Charles was even reluctant to pay for the facility, preventing them from taking my mother-in-law to the hospital. I'll pay, so let's get you to the hospital. But please get better quickly and play with my sons again, I said with a smile. My mother-in-law seemed taken aback. Okay. After confirming her nod, I left the room and arranged things with the staff. A few days later, I visited my mother-in-law again. And surprisingly, Charles was there too. However, the content of their conversation was terrible. Mom, I just need a little. Can you lend me some money? Why do you only show up when you're in trouble? Don't be mad. Charles continued to speak in a soft voice, seemingly unaware that I was standing at the entrance of the room. Mom, you must have some of Dad's inheritance left, right? Give it to me. Don't talk nonsense. His mother snapped back sharply, her anger seemingly overcoming her illness and giving her a moment of clarity. The money is for the grandchildren. They'll need it if they're gonna go to college. And I also want to give some to Sarah, who has been very kind to me. That woman is a stranger to us now. Even if she's a stranger, she's kinder than you are. His mother retorted firmly. The inheritance will go to the grandchildren. You won't get a penny from it. Mom. Charles's voice took on a pleading tone. But it was in vain. When his mother noticed me, she smiled warmly. Please take care of the grandchildren, Sarah. Yes, ma'am. I nodded solemnly. Charles was still trying to press his case, but he was escorted out of the room by a concerned staff member who sensed that something was amiss. I later learned that his mother, anticipating that her illness would soon leave her incapacitated, had consulted with a lawyer through the facility to ensure her wishes were followed. Charles had been persistent in his visits, but in the end, his mother's resolve did not waver. When Tim came home from school, he exclaimed in a voice close to a scream. Dad came to my school today and said he wanted to live with me all of a sudden. Given his previous indifference, it was hard to believe he had suddenly started to feel lonely. Besides, Tim was set to inherit from his grandmother. It seemed likely that Charles was trying to take him away in the hope of getting his hands on the inheritance. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, I ran away. Something's definitely not right. Dad wouldn't want to live with me. Tim was unaware that he was the chosen heir to the inheritance. But he still sensed that something was off about his father's sudden appearance. He might go to Mark's place too. That's a possibility, I replied, hastily getting ready to go pick up Mark. Stay at home, Tim. Don't open the door for anyone. Got it. I left Tim nodding in agreement and rushed out on my bike. I found Mark confronting Charles midway on his way home from school. Both of them wearing stern expressions. "Just go away. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Don't say things like that, come on," Charles pleaded, reaching out his hand to Mark. But Mark turned and ran away. "Hey, stop. Help, please. There's a strange man here," Mark called out, effectively labeling his biological father as a strange man. It was harsh. But given Charles's past behavior, it was not entirely unjustifiable. Mark noticed me and latched onto my arm, saying, "Mom, get rid of him, please." "Charles, that's enough," I said, stepping in between them to protect Mark. Charles glared at me, grinding his teeth. "This doesn't concern you. Let me talk to Mark." "Mark is my son," I declared. I had been the one to raise him from birth. Charles hadn't even held him as a baby. While he was out enjoying his weekends, I was at home, overwhelmed with childcare. And now he wanted to talk? Most likely, he wanted to convince Mark to renounce his inheritance, so the money would come to him instead. "Mark, go call for help," I instructed. "Okay." Mark nodded and ran off. And as Charles tried to follow, I warned him. "If you continue to bother my family, I'll have to call the cops." "What did you say?" Charles was red in the face, looking like a demon. "You've ruined my future," he said. "Well, you had it coming," was the response. The current state of Charles was the result of him lying to 3 women, including myself. However, Charles couldn't understand that. Incapable of admitting his own faults, Charles remained immature, with no progress or growth in his life. "Over here," shouted Mark, returning with a few men. Suddenly, Charles turned timid. He tried to run away but was surrounded by the men. Charles was then taken to the police station. He was labeled as a stalker and was prohibited from approaching or interfering with us. Nevertheless, just to be safe, arrangements were made for the school teacher to drive my sons home. I apologize for my ex-husband causing trouble. "No, the hard part is on Mark and the boys," said the teacher. "Charles still calls, even now. But none of us in the family pay him any mind. With support from those around us, we've successfully pushed Charles out of our daily lives." Choosing a holiday, my sons and I visited my mother-in-law. She was dozing off, but when Tim ran up to her, she showed a smile. "Thank you for coming." "Tim, Mark. It's been a while, Grandma." Mark started a cheerful conversation with my mother-in-law. According to the caregiver, her condition is slowly worsening. Eventually, she might forget about all of us. I hope to create as many memories as possible with my sons before that happens. After spending a good amount of time with her, it was time to leave. Walking down the hallway of the facility, my sons seemed restless. "Mom, can I talk to you for a sec?" "What is it?" Tim hesitantly took my hand. And Mark took the other. "Hey, no fair, Tim." "I want to as well," Mark chimed in. "What's going on with you two?" I was feeling ticklish inside. Come to think of it, when the boys were little, we often walked together holding hands like this. "It's fine once in a while," I said. "Yeah, it is." They agreed, and we all started laughing and walked on. Looking back, it's been a long journey of housework, raising children, and eventually caregiving, while also working part-time jobs for 15 years. The end result was bitter. Charles had betrayed me and left. But still, I can smile. Because of my sons, I am not alone. We've cultivated a bond that allows us to laugh together like this. I will never let go of this bond, I thought, smiling to myself.